Today, we're going to talk about accessible transit, which, if you've been listening to Radio Noon, you know it's something I've been wanting to talk about for the last couple of weeks, ever since I met with a few people who use it. And they complained about how long it takes to book a ride with accessible transit, the City of Winnipeg's Transit Plus system. Well, just yesterday, a news release came into my email box saying the City of Winnipeg is providing a new app and website for Transit Plus users. It'll start this summer in July. It should let people who use this door-to-door transportation service book a ride online. So how big a difference could that app make to your life? What other things need to improve when it comes to the accessibility of transit? The number to call is 204-780-0893. Brandon, Thompson, and Steinbach are rethinking how they can offer transit services. If you live in a community other than Winnipeg, we want to hear from you too today. What would accessible transit mean to you and your life? How do you get around now? The number to call toll-free is 1-800-268-5483. Now, we have, I know Jenny Kowalson was trying to get in touch with us. Do we have Jenny Kowalson on the line, Wendy? Okay, great. On line one, forgive me for reaching out behind the curtain there and revealing things. Jenny Kowalson is an educational assistant in Elmwood High School in Winnipeg. She uses a wheelchair. Hi, Jenny. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Janet. Thanks for having me.
What would you like to see improved when it comes to accessible transit?
First, I'd like to see more vehicles available because there is a higher demand that the vehicles just can't seem to be able to meet.
How often do you have to wait, and how long usually?
Usually to book a trip, I'm on the phone for the most has been like 3 hours. But usually it's about an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Just to book?
Just to book a trip, and then for them to schedule it takes about another 40 minutes. I can be on the phone total for almost 3 hours a few times a week.
So what do you think of the news that the city is going to introduce an app and a web page for booking trips?
I think it's about time. I think if it's done properly, it could be really helpful because we have the same thing for taxis already. So I think they can implement the same systems. I think it can help a lot of people.
We heard from a Transit Plus user named Dorian Phillips, who mentioned she'd like to see the 30-minute window for waiting for a ride shortened. Is that what you find, too, that you often have to wait? Even if you've got the trip booked, it can take 30 minutes to get there?
Oh, yeah, 30 minutes plus some days. I've been waiting at work to go home. And, my pickups between, let's say, 3:45 and 4:15, there have been days I've been waiting at work till almost 4:45 for them to come and get me.
Is there anything else you'd like to say about accessible transit and how it should change?
Like Dorian, I'd like to see the window change. And also for the drivers, to be more aware of how they treat people with disabilities and their mobility equipment. I've had to make several complaints for my equipment being mishandled on Winnipeg Transit Plus.
Well, and I know that wheelchairs, for example, certainly power wheelchairs are very, very, expensive to fix. You don't want stuff messed with.
Yes, wheelchairs. I've had them almost break my walkers at times because they're securing it wrong, and then they get mad at me when I try and suggest to them how what a better way is as the person that the mobility aid belongs to, and then they get mad at me saying I'm being uncooperative. So having more training.
Training is a good idea. Jenny Kowalson, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem.
We have two special guests with us in the studio today as well. David Cron is Executive Director of the Cerebral Palsy Association of Manitoba. Thanks for being here, David.
Thanks, Janet.
And I should say David Crone. I always say your last name incorrectly. Okay. I apologize. And also Kyle Mason is with us. He's the Executive Director of CNIB Manitoba. You were nodding your head as Jenny was talking about some of the issues with booking and having to wait. What have you been hearing from your clients?
Well, our participants, I would echo much of what the caller was saying. We hear time and time again the drivers can be rude and rushed, and when it comes to some of our participants with guide dogs, they're not happy if a guide dog has to go with their person, obviously. But It's yeah, everything that she said, we would echo. Like, long wait times for pickups, long wait times to book. It's a system that obviously needs a lot of attention, and this app and these new ways of booking is a right step forward, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Call now if you'd like to join this conversation. Our number is 204-780-0893. We'd love to hear from you. 204-780-0893. If you need a toll-free number because you live outside of Winnipeg, we want to hear from you too. 1-800-268-5483. Now we have Brenda joining us. Hi, Brenda. Thanks for calling Radio Noon.
Hi. Thank you, Janet. Okay, my complaint is, now I'm not in a wheelchair. I can walk, on, like in the taxi or like, my complaint, is, and I've asked Transit Plus if I can just be sent, like the taxi, the car, because the buses and the vans are not properly equipped for people sitting in those seats. There's like a square flat bottom and a flat back, and it's there's a seat belt, but there's really nothing around you like there would be in a car. And if the driver happens to be a terrible driver, which I've encountered, like I'm all over the place. I sway from front, or side to side. I have a bad back. I have a neurological condition, and I have a bad back besides. Now, I contacted the OT department
Occupational therapy?
Yeah, occupational therapy at Transit Plus, and I requested to have like cars only, and they can do that. And I stated the reasons why. I got a call back from an OT, and she said, we don't fulfill this request for comfort care. I could not believe that she said that.
For comfort care?
Yes, that's exactly what she said. And I said, look, I have just explained to you that I have, like a chronic back issues and a neurological condition. And you were saying this to me? I don't believe, I believe what she said, but it was like, I don't know, crass and,
it felt like she didn't understand.
Yeah. Oh, well, it felt like, she didn't understand, but it felt like she didn't believe what I was saying. And I can't think of the word for it. It was more than she didn't understand. She didn't ask for clarification, and what she said to me was way out of line. Yeah.
Brenda, thank you for calling us.
You're welcome.
Sorry for your experience.
Well,
David,
and I think it has to. Okay.
No, go ahead, Brenda. We can still hear you.
I think it has to change to. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So David Crone from the Cerebral Palsy Association of Manitoba, we've heard a few callers now making comments about the training of our drivers, that they're just not treated with respect.
Well, that's always been the issue. Like with Brenda's thing, those buses, you bounce around in the back of them. They're built for, lots of wheelchairs. It depends on how they schedule the drivers, right? If the driver's been rushed all day and doesn't have a chance to have lunch or a pee break or anything like that, again, they feel that pressure there. So just like what Jenny was saying, there needs to be more resources for the system. An app and the ability to actually contact them in a timely manner is helpful. I know I was on their advisory committee back in 2019, and they were talking about doing this, and it's now 2024, right? So it's a good step, but there needs to be more to it.
Axel joins us now. Thank you for calling Radio Noon, Axel. What would you like to say?
Well, I'm disabled my whole life, and I got on an actual public transit bus, and was going to my eye appointment at the Misericordia, and a stroller came on, and then another stroller came on. I was in the disability seat, and I was asked to move and had to move out of the disability seat. The people at transit took no accountability. They never called me back, so they're irresponsible back down at public transit as far as I'm concerned, and my cries fell on deaf ears down there. Excuse the pun.
Is that... you have an invisible disability?
I had my cane out. My cane was out. I tapped it on the floor, and the bus driver seen my Canadian National Institute for the Blind card.
Right.
So I was asked to move out of that seat. A stroller trumped my disability, and people at Transit Authority, they didn't call me back. I called them back. They said the issue was resolved. I asked what the decision was, and they wouldn't tell me.
Kyle Mason, as you may have heard, Axel, is with us now from the CNIB. Kyle, what do you think Axel should do in this case?
Well, he could definitely reach out to our office. So we have staff that are there to advocate on behalf of people. But this is sadly not an isolated incident where there's a lot of things that have not been thought through when it comes to the public transits, when it comes to people with who are blind or have low vision, because there's a number of different things that have to be addressed. Like even before you get on the bus, depending on the weather, is the stop snow covered? Is it icy? Is there crumbling concrete? Are the bus shelters clean? Are they not smelling of urine or other things like that? Also, people have to be conscious of like what bus is pulling up. There's some routes that have multiple buses coming rapidly, and the buses don't always announce what route they are. And if they ask the driver if the door pulls up, sometimes the drivers share what route they are. Sometimes they're too busy. Sometimes they may not hear. Sometimes they're rude, and of course, sometimes they get a good response. But it's a mixed bag. But even when they do get onto the bus, we hear often that bus drivers don't wait an appropriate amount of time for our participants to find their seat
and to get settled safely before things move.
Yeah, I understand bus have tight timelines, but they should wait just a little bit to make sure that people are safely seated. And then, there needs to be different ways to find, to accommodate strollers and people who have different needs.
Axel, are you still with us?
Yeah.
Did you manage to get a seat, or did you have to stand?
Well, I had to move to the back of the bus like a lady back in the 60s or 50s there. So I just don't understand why a stroller trumps my disability, and that seat's clearly marked disabled.
Axel, thank you very much for calling in.
Thank you.
David Crone, what do you think needs to be done in terms of understanding the true needs, how to truly make transit system accessible, like drivers not stepping on it?
It really comes down to resources. If you have enough buses, whether they're handy transit buses or regular buses, if there's one every 5 minutes, there's room for you, whether it's a stroller or whatever. It shouldn't be the Hunger Games at the front of the bus looking for a seat. And just like was previous mentioned, like all the stuff that has to go along with it, like the bus stops have to be clear. The driver has to, we have to give the bus drivers time to do the accommodation, right? And I don't think that the scheduling department in transit really takes that into place.
In that case, with so many strollers, all the space is needed for strollers. Perhaps the bus driver, it would have been lovely if one of the able-bodied people also seated near had stood up and said, "Axel, take my seat.
Well,
here, sir."
And that's it. Now, there is some clear documentation or, signage on buses now. But again, it comes down to an awareness. It comes down to just a little common sense and a common courtesy. I think it really is. But it also comes down to, the other thing I've heard is when the bus is full and somebody's sitting there, let's say using a chair, the bus just drives by, right? Because they're full and it happens. And if it's 30 below, there has to be a system in Saskatchewan, in Regina. They have a system where the driver can call a handy transit. They say, hey, my bus is full. I've got a person at stop whatever. And they dispatch a handy transit unit to follow up with that bus to get them to their next stop. So there are ways to do it. It just comes down to resources.
We also, I mentioned that I got messages from Dorian Phillips, who uses Transit Plus in Winnipeg. One of her issues has to do with awareness as well. The common courtesy and the awareness of the other people in the bus, for example, understand that extra uncontrollable movements, she said, can be startling, that it just happens and it can't be avoided. And awareness that people who have a hard time speaking, or maybe their speech is hard to understand, doesn't mean that they can't hear you, and they may understand everything that's being said around them. I take that to mean that Dorian's experienced of people being rude and saying things that they wouldn't if they understood that she was fully aware of what they were saying.
I know Dorian very well. She's a longtime member of the association, and she uses a device to speak for her, and I'm hoping this new system has something where she could text or email her trip request. I'm hoping that the new app has all accessibility features, because up to this point, Dorian's had to get somebody to call for her when there's a problem, whether it's booking or whether the vehicle doesn't show up.
Now, what about accessibility for people who are visually impaired, Kyle? How is that nowadays with apps? Is everything voice activated?
There certainly have been improvements when it comes to smartphones and other different types of technology, but there's still a lot of different things to consider. Our society is still focused and centered around people with sight. So people who are blind or have low vision or who are deaf blind still have to find workarounds, and there's still a lot of obstacles to overcome.
So we've only got a few minutes left with you both. What is the main message that you would have, David Crone, for people who plan accessibility for transit?
Well, it comes down to consistency, training, and resources. If you have all those three things, I think you'll have a much better system.
Yeah, and I would agree with those things too, but also being courteous and thoughtful. Our society, everybody should feel welcomed and appreciated and fully included. And just sometimes it just takes an extra second or two to be considerate of people who have different needs.
And where does that knowledge and awareness come from?
Well, it should come from the home, but the fact is that anybody has the ability to take half a second to be thoughtful and to be considerate. But when it comes to the infrastructure and to the different systems, it does require different levels of government to make sure that all these different systems are sufficient and are able to meet the demand. And
also we heard from people who say that they complained but didn't hear anything back.
And I've put complaints in to Transit Plus and never heard back. So their customer service needs to be improved.
Yeah, I can also suggest that, when it comes to people who have a blind or low vision, they can contact our office. We'd be happy to help. But also, if anybody have any different needs or abilities, they can also reach out to their city councilors and find a way to connect with them that way.
Kyle Mason is Executive Director of CNIB Manitoba, and David Crone is Executive Director of the Cerebral Palsy Association of Manitoba. Thank you both for joining us today. To comment on what you've heard here today and keep this conversation going, remember you can leave a message anytime at 204-788-3797.